Good evening. Welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I am Bishop Vanessa M. Brown, your host and moderator for this evening. We are grateful for you coming to us to hear about theological and current events through a theological and justice informed lens. And you know that we always like to shout you out and find out where you are from. So do us one great big favor tonight. Make sure that you are shouting out where you are from. I already see people already checking in. And I also want you all to do me a favor on all our social media platforms. Please make sure that you let people know that we're here. So we are on Facebook, and you can find us on the Beyond the Gatekeepers page as well as Bishop Yvette A. Flunder's page. You can also find us on YouTube under Beyond the Gatekeepers page, on IG on Beyond the Gatekeepers page, and you can find us on LinkedIn. And we want you, we can find us on Instagram as well. So all the social media platforms we're on, sharing about this absolutely wonderful conversation that we will have on this evening. So I see checking in Chuck Hunt from Monroe, Louisiana. Welcome, Chuck, and Happy New Year to you. Grateful to be here in this new year for our first show of the year. Albert Reed from Colleen, Texas. Sharita Hall, welcome. Tanya Jackson from Delaware, welcome. Jamie Younger, welcome. Y'all got to make sure y'all tell me where y'all from. Bishop Sonia Williams from Atlanta is here. Yes. Reverend Tracy Ruffin, welcome, welcome. Melba Jackson, Lavinia Bean, Kate May, Siegfried Benton, welcome from Temple Hills, Maryland. Karen Coleman from Boston. Leandra Stewart Boyce, Happy New Year to you all. Valerie Moore from New York City. CJ Kathy Jacobs from Kentucky. Debbie Brown from Chicago. Ronnie Jordan, Rancho Cucamonga, California. Del Marche Sledge, Columbus, Ohio. Charles L.A. Watterson, Delaware, Columbus, Ohio. I sound a bit muffled. We're going to work it out. LL in Highland Park, New Jersey. Darlene Pittman, Queens, Newark Fellowship Church, welcome. Unity Fellowship Church of Newark in Newark, New Jersey, welcome, welcome, welcome. Apostle Edward Donaldson, Seattle, Washington. Bosma Jackson, Arkansas. Happy New Year, everybody. Apostle Devlin from Tavares, Florida. Y'all text me and tell me if y'all can hear me. Hugh Patrick Hardeman, Louisville, Kentucky. Welcome. Reginald Nichols. Welcome. Stockton, California. Welcome. I see you all. Leroy Martin, Detroit, Michigan. Very good. Okay. I see you all coming in the room. I want to give everybody an opportunity. Thank you so much, so much, so much. Ha. Thank you. Thank you all. Listen, we want to get right into our conversation on tonight. But before we do that, we certainly want to bring in Bishop Yvette A. Flunder. She cannot be missed and has to be a part of this conversation, particularly on tonight. She's our presiding prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, also the senior pastor of City of Refuge United Church of Christ. And so, Bishop Flunder, we say Happy New Year to you, and we welcome you here.
Well, thank you so very much, Bishop Vanessa M. Brown. It is my joy to be in conversation with you and our incredible guests, particularly in this time, in this moment. And we'll say much more about this, I am sure, in our conversation, but I cannot imagine that there is any more important conversation, important conversation right now than to talk about all of the conversations that are out there among our people that have to do with intimacy, that have to do with what the Bible says, what has to do with being bifurcated and trafficated and all the different things that we are right now. But it just seems to be a God moment for
Mm,
have some grown folks conversations
I think so.
around the issues that and the realities that we will talk about tonight. So I'm telling everybody, put on your seatbelt, get something warm to drink,
Yeah.
shut the door, tell the people to leave you alone.
Hmm.
Have a grown folks chat tonight. We
Yes,
so do need to do that.
we
Our
do.
children need us to do it, but we also need to do it as the people
We
of God.
also need
God
to do
bless.
it. Yes, Bishop. We also, before I bring in our guests, I want to shout out Bishop Levi Richards. Happy New Year to you, Elder Boaz Parker. Welcome. Carol Jackson from Long Beach, California. Boaz is from Philly. We saying welcome to you, welcome to you, welcome to you. Romney Darkins, blessings to you. Thank you for being on tonight. We appreciate you all very, very much for being here with us. And certainly we want to Dr. Roberto Ochoa. I do know that name. We know that name, Bishop Flunder. Dr. Roberto Ochoa. He's with the UCC. Anyway, he's watching on IG. Welcome. Thank you so much. Quincy. Quincy is here, Bishop Flunder. Quincy James Reinhardt. Blessings to you. All right, let's get to our guest, Yvette Busby. Good evening to you. Let's get to our guest on tonight. Tonight, we have the privilege of having Dr. Courtney Bryant here with us. She's a preacher, scholar, and a teacher. And we are so grateful for your presence, Dr. Courtney Bryant, for being here with us on tonight. Will you greet our virtual audience?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody, and Happy New Year. It is fantastic to be with you in this place today. I've been super excited about having a conversation about this book with the Black community, and not just the scholarly community, right? But the people of God who are interested in issues about our bodies and about the erotic capacity of those bodies. So I'm super excited about having this conversation, and just want to thank you both for the invitation.
So are we. And so, for the record, so the folks will know what we are discussing, the name of her book is Erotic Defiance: Womanism, Freedom, and Resistance. Let me say it again because I just love the way it sounds. Erotic Defiance: Womanism, Freedom, and Resistance. Our author tonight is Dr. Courtney Bryant. And listen, we want to encourage you to purchase the book, okay? And you know that we do that all the time. I believe that Pastor Sue will put everything down into the links so that you know how to buy it. But I also want to tell you that we are also going to give away a copy of the book courtesy of Dr. Bryant. So there's going to be a free book giveaway. And when I tell you, you will write the hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers so that you can win the book. I see that Bishop Tanya Rawls has entered. Welcome, Bishop Rawls. Charlotte, North Carolina is here. I see that Minister Sandy Hudson is here from Paris, California. Nyla Curry is here with us. And we are grateful for all of those who are joining us on Facebook, on IG, on Instagram. Dr. Courtney Bryant, tell me this, because I know that you've done a lot of work on this book. I know that it has required a lot of prayer. Yes?
Absolutely.
And so tell me why you wrote this book.
Why did I write the book? Well, when I was in divinity school at Duke, there was a lot of conversation about the body, right? The body as a theological subject. And we all know that as African American people, our faith, our Christian faith, is often disembodied, right? Our body is fine, so so long as it's doing the work of the Lord, so long as it's serving, right? But as soon as that body takes on desire, if you will, right, it becomes a problem. And this is incredibly heightened by African American culture, which has taught us that our bodies are a problem, that our bodies are no good, that sin comes from our bodies, that any sexual urge that we have is improper and somehow removes us from communion with God. And so I think that I wrote Erotic Defiance first and foremost as an apologetic for Black women recognizing, or, at least my experience was that every time I walked into a room, my presence was always overshadowed by what people assumed about my body. And so I wanted to begin to grapple with this fear that we have of the erotic. Now, I need to say from the outset that I fell in love with Audre Lorde's essay, Uses of the Erotic, when I was in divinity school. It opened up so many new possibilities for me as it pertained to how I understood erotic power. But I also spent some time with Karen Baker Fletcher's writing and Kelly Brown Douglas's writing, and was constantly thinking about the ways that from Augustine to Aquinas, and now I'm, digging in the old dead white men. Well, some people think they're white, actually, Augustine, I don't know, North African. But the ways that sex always meant, or that the erotic always meant, that it was afar off from God. Like, even if we're thinking about the beatific vision, right, from the perspective of Aquinas, right, there is no kind of erotic notion in that concept. And so I began to think about, well, first and foremost, why did God give us bodies? And second of all, why did God give these bodies erotic capacities? Now, from my perspective, as I work with the erotic, I describe the erotic as the love, the embodiment of love, right? The communication of love, the experience of love in and through the flesh. So every time we are experiencing love, anytime we are imparting love to one another and using our bodies, I consider that erotic. Now, don't get me wrong. The erotic is certainly sexual, and we definitely want to tend to what that means. But one of the things that I found as I was writing is that we limit the erotic to this purely sexual thing, where if we look at Black women's literature, if we look at the Bible, if we look at the ways that erotic energy is being harnessed, even, on any given day, that it is more than just the sexual, but is very much about this relational capacity that we have with one another using our bodies. So I would describe a mother breastfeeding her child as erotic. I would describe Jesus getting on the cross and dying for the world as erotic, because this is the way that he was using his body to demonstrate his love for the world. And so when we begin to do that, I think that it opens up so many possibilities for how we understand the erotic and how we understand the capacity of our own bodies, and the ways that the erotic allows us to actually participate in the life of God. One of the things that Kelly Brown Douglas talks about is that to acknowledge the imago Dei, right? To acknowledge the image of God in our lives is to participate in the love of God with others. And so what better way for Black bodies to do that than to defiantly say, my body is beautiful, my body is amazing, my body is created by God and is being used in all the things that I do, whether that be me loving myself and understanding a definition of myself that is completely contrary to what the world might say, whether it's two women loving one another, as we see with Celie and Shug in the first chapter of the book, as Celie bathes Shug and comes to life. Like, well, what is this? Like, I'm bathing her, but it feels like I'm praying. And all of these things are coming alive inside of me. Well, what does that mean that erotic energy brings us to life? One of the things that I found, and I'm realizing, wow, this is a long answer, but one of the things that I found as I was writing the book is that the erotic and the Holy Spirit, if not, I'm not here to say that they're the same thing, but they definitely operate in tandem as this kind of life-giving force, this force that alivens us, wakes us up, and it makes us passionate about living in life. And so I wrote the book for that reason, so that people could understand, number one, that their bodies are amazingly beautiful, made by God and used by God, even in our erotic capacities, right? And that as we love one another with our bodies, we are doing the work of God.
This is beautiful. I'm gonna let Bishop Flunder chime in, but I must say, like, there are some things you just talked about. God reaching out to us over and over again is erotic. That's just
Amen. Yep, that's right.
that's
And
I
it,
don't
and
even
I
know what
think
to
that it
say.
requires a maturity, right? Because it's, as Paul says, like when you were babies, I gave you milk, but now I'm giving you real food. Like as you journey with God throughout your life, you recognize that ebb and that flow, right? Of God calling you back in. And it is erotic, right? Like even if we think about the prophet, Hosea, right? And how
Yeah.
he's supposed to go and take Gomer. Like, go and take this person who continues to disrespect you, because that love is a longing. Our love for God and God's love for us is a longing, right? That is comparable to a kind of erotic impulse, something that we can't get enough of. And when we describe it like this, because I have to tell you, I have many a friend, particularly my friends in divinity school, who would be like, oh my gosh, why are you describing our relationship with God like that? But no, it's palpable, right? It sets you afire and ablaze, but in a beautiful way. And so often, particularly as African Americans, we're so used to our flesh being considered evil. But the question then becomes, if that is in fact the case, why would God give us flesh? And so that led me to sitting with Athanasius for a good while to better understand, like, not only did God give us flesh, but God, in sending Jesus Christ, sends Jesus Christ as flesh. There is something about this flesh that enables us, that provides, if you will, the apparatus for love. As spirited beings, how would one love without a body? It's a rhetorical question, but how would one love without a body? What does that look like? Do you send beams of love and energy? I guess, but these hands are holy. These lips are holy. These feet are holy. These shoulders are holy, whether they're holding people, whether they're carrying food to one another, whether they're gripping people in embrace. Because with all that goes on in this world, the one thing that people can't take away from us, right, as Black people, has been our relational capacity, our ability to reach out and feel a sense of kinship, a sense of oneness with one another. And so when the resources are constantly being taken away from us, the only resource we have left that no one can take is our body, is our flesh. And so I really wanted to underscore the power of that flesh, and for us to recognize that that power is not simply about genitals and purely sexuality, although that is a beautiful part of it.
Thank you so much for that brilliant explanation. I just feel like saying, where you been all my life, girl? Bishop Flunder.
It's so important, especially right now, because this is a lot of what is being discussed in our community. And it is both problematic and necessary that we have this conversation, given all of the conversation that is out there on social media and everywhere else about intimacy, about sexuality, about whether we should sing secular songs on, when the new year comes in.
Swag surfing, y'all. Swag surfing.
Come on here. And too much jiggling. When, the Methodist jiggling is an active part of our services in many, many places. And I think something as simple as the fact that the song that I sing and recorded with Bishop Hawkins, thank you, Lord. When it is in the church, it's a certain way. When it's in the club, it's another way. It is on the 2 and the 4. In the church, it's on the 1 and the 3. In the club, because it's in the club, it's made to dance. If you understand what I'm saying, in the church, it's made to sound like gospel music. And the real difference, the lyrics are the same.
Yeah.
Difference is simply the movement, the environment,
Mm-hmm.
the sound, the reason that people are there.
Ooh, I like that. The reason.
The
Yeah.
reason. You
The
see, you
reason.
have a different reason when you're at the club than you
Mm-hmm.
have when you're at the church. And what people are trying to suggest
Mm.
is that we are bifurcating, that we should bifurcate ourselves.
Mm.
We should never bring our 1 and the 3 to our 2 and the 4. Do you
Mhm.
understand?
I
What?
understand. Yeah,
Absolutely.
You
it
feel
actually,
what I'm saying?
I
But
completely do.
but it's all me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I am passionate in
Mm-hmm.
worship, which I am,
Absolutely.
alone and with other people, when
Uh-huh.
I am passionate in worship, I am that same passionate person
Mm-hmm.
in an environment that is not designed to be
Mm-hmm.
worship.
Mm-hmm.
I remain passionate, but I can be passionate in certain places and erotic
Mm-hmm.
in those places with the same music, long as it's on the 1 and the 3 as versus 2 and the 4, which sort of really blows my mind that we have to bifurcate.
Mm. But now I'm hearing what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. We should live in spaces and statuses of freedom.
Well,
Unfortunately,
I don't want to interrupt you, but let me just add a couple other things, and then I
okay,
want you to take it and just have a time. I mean,
okay.
it's just important from the vantage point
Mm-hmm.
of being in and around extremely physical services. I'm a Pentecostal, raised a Pentecostal, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
around Methodist all the time. It's a lot of jiggling.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay? A lot of movement,
Yes.
a lot of being involved. And in this conversation that we're talking about, really out here right now, about the presence of sexuality in secular songs and church songs and where they should be done, and church leaders showing up in secular locations, and why are you there, and why are you there even if you didn't do anything, why are you there,
Mm-hmm.
has so much to do with us not having the kind of conversations that your book is encouraging, which is to fully embrace the total of who we are
Mm-hmm.
as designed by God.
Mm-hmm.
Danny Bell said, we're designers originals, one of a kind, created by a master,
Mm-hmm.
purpose in mind, to be a showcase of
Mm-hmm.
God's glory for the whole world to see, and an example of God's beauty as God shines through you and me. So I completely support your premise, and I'm encouraging us. It's almost like I want to tell everybody, come on, can we grow up?
That's it.
Is it conceivably possible
Mm.
that we don't have to be two different people
Mm.
all the time? Anyway, a little bit more, but I want to hear what you're sharing.
No, I'm what you're saying deeply resonates, because that's one of the things that I was wrestling with as I wrote the book. I mean, I think that they say that for people who get PhDs, when they write, what they write comes out of their life. And I definitely, was a church girl, and, was very curvaceous and voluptuous. And the way that that was received at church was tough, because my mom had to do a lot of work with me at home to make sure that I knew that just because someone may overdetermine, like attempt to overdetermine you through your sexuality because of whatever scripts that they want to offer, does not mean that that's what you have to pick up. But freedom always comes at a cost, right? Freedom always comes at a cost. Like, you can live a free life, you can choose to operate a different way, but there will always be consequences. And so that's one of the things that I was really wrestling with as well, because erotic defiance, this notion of showing up in the world in your own body and loving that body, loving the Africaneity of that body, loving the various cultural accoutrement, right? All of that, is a defiant act of saying, I am here, I am beautiful, I am worthy. All of that is important. And it's wonderful to be able to make that assertion, but it does not change the way that those who seek to antagonize us simply, because we all know to run around being a free Black woman is wrong, right? We know that this is what actually antagonizes the general public. I mean, one of the biggest problems that I've had throughout my life is she thinks she's too free, right? This is what you mean you love yourself? What you mean you feel comfortable showing up in the skin you're in, right? So that in itself is an act of defiance. And I want to name that because many a Black woman and Black man goes through that as they move about life if they've chosen to move about the world with dignity, right? Like, and that like sort of self-made dignity where I don't need to worry about what you think because I know what God has said about me, right? So there is that kind of freedom and that is beautiful, but it never takes away the fact that there is a choreography of dispossession going on in the world constantly, especially as it pertains to Black people. And that as Black people, we are supposed to be bodies that do the service of white people. We are supposed to be bodies that bid the pleasure of white people. And when we seek to do our own thing, it is perceived as antagonism. It is perceived as sin because a Black body is supposed to be a desireless body if it is going to be acceptable, right, to the general public. And so what do we then do with this choreography of dispossession that says, I don't care what you think that you are, we are always going to relegate you to a sexual object. We are always going to relegate you to an object of service, right? Because those things are constantly still going to be playing at us, even when we believe ourselves to be free. And so erotic defiance also speaks to the very strategies that Black women have used, recognizing, right, their fullness and their worthiness intrinsically, but still having to fight the fight, right? And in my book, I call it a kind of capoeira, like it's a dance that we do, but it's a dance, it's a warrior's dance, because we're constantly trying to evade the darts, if you will, of the enemy. Now, we could talk about that from a spiritual perspective. We could talk about that from a political perspective. But at the end of the day, Black people, both men and women, have got to begin to understand the power that they possess simply by being and asserting themselves as they are. But secondly, through their relational capacities. Like if we think about what has enabled Black people, our community or us as individuals to continue to be resilient and to continue to press forward in spite of all of the various things that constantly come at us, it is our loving relationships. It is that person who came and inspired us. It is that person who said that you're beautiful regardless of what has happened. And it's important to remember that this is not only possible with just Black people. I think that the erotic impulse and capacity is not just for Black people, but I think that we do it so well that we offer a kind of how-to for those who are following along.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's one other thing that comes up for me is that if we are seeing ourselves worthy of an erotic experience, and we see the beauty of spirituality involved, and as I say all the time, God gave us all these things. He didn't mean for us to neglect them,
That's
and
right.
It didn't mean for us to in some way demean them and demonize them. But simultaneously, as Black women, in fact, as women, period, we were in many ways told that our job is to make beautiful someone else's experience.
That's it.
Our responsibility is to make ourselves prepared and desirous of blessing somebody else. And many of us came up not knowing how to bless ourselves. And we did not know how to help somebody know how to bless us because we were not encouraged that to understand that ours is not just to serve, but to be served.
Yeah.
And that's a shift. I know some women, Bishop Vanessa, I know some women that have just a whole pack of kids. Just a whole pack of them, never been blessed. I think maybe I understand what I'm trying to say. This is
I do hear what you're trying to say.
They've never been blessed. They don't even know how to find a blessing.
I mean, and so if we can, if we speak super plainly on January 3rd of 2024, you know, a lot of our sexuality, right, is very much, I mean, and even the ways that we perform sexuality, how, like, let me show you that I can be desired, right? Yes. But very little of, you know, let me show you how I desire, right?
Yes.
I think about twerking, and I know that twerking, you know, young people love twerking, and I get it, you know, and I even have a little piece in my 3rd chapter about twerking and how dancing in general can be an amazing, freeing practice. But we still live in a world where the gaze compromises even the most liberative of practices. And I would even say, for lack of a better term, perverts how we understand our bodies and how we understand our sexualities, because we don't see it as something that is reciprocal, right? Something that goes back and forth. But instead, we, as I said, we are socialized to believe that our lives, our existence, our sexualities, and our bodies are for the pleasure of the other. And so when you say, and so we're so busy trying to please that we don't even know how to be blessed ourselves. You're absolutely right, because, you know, the bifurcation, as you've mentioned, has caused us, and Shanika Walker Barnes talks about this so well in Too Heavy a Yoke. We've cut ourselves off from our bodies. We don't even know what feels good. And the scary part about that in this day and age is that we have fallen into the trap of believing that it only feels good to be desired, period. That's the end of it. So long as somebody desires me, then I am worthy. And so my question becomes, well, what happens when you move on up in years and you become 60 and 70 and you still got the girls twerking? And I mean, nobody really wants to see a 70-year-old twerk. So do you continue?
Be careful.
But I'm just saying, like, do you continue to be worthy? And if so, where does it come from? And so I'm so fearful because I see so many young people. And I feel like, you know, I've even been there before. So long as someone desires me, then I am worthy, you know, of time and attention. And I'm like, no, baby. You're bigger than, you're so big you don't even realize.
That's right.
You don't even realize how your body and how your relationships can build literal worlds.
Okay. Wait. No. Now, okay, one more thing, Bishop Vanessa. First of all, the other thing is that Black church is very sensual. Much more than more typical white church, or even steeple Black churches, if you understand what I'm saying, is still more sensual than their contemporary non-Black churches. And I just want to put that out there. And churches of color, you know, Hispanic churches, and I can say a lot more about that. But when we leave those experiences, I know that people leave those experiences having been, to some degree, titillated. I've seen some services where I think people came to titillate. I'm just kind of lay that out there. I think the reason that I'm lifting it up is because there is a dichotomy. We're not supposed to do that. Yet our form of worship oftentimes when you're on a hard strut down the middle aisle, if you understand what I'm saying, at Mount Pisgah Missionary Baptist Church, okay, you're on your way down that middle aisle, and you bringing it, and you bringing all of it. Hallelujah, all your gifts. There's somebody that can experience that visibly and experience something. How am I doing with that? And I don't think that is anti-God.
Mm.
And I certainly don't see it as anti-human. And I can also see it as praiseworthy. Essentially, where there's two different kinds of things to praise. We're praising with our bodies, God, because that's very Black, to praise with our bodies, but simultaneously we are praising our bodies. We are seeing those bodies
as instruments of praise.
Come on here. All right.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because when I first started writing the book, one of the things that I was very interested in was Pentecostal culture, Black Pentecostals, right? And the laying on of hands, which I find like, if that's not erotic, I don't know what is. And also worship, right? So one of my primary questions when I first began was, how can Black people's bodies be the primary site of worship while simultaneously being the primary site of oppression? Right? Yes. And because of that, the simultaneous moment of, this is my instrument of praise, but this instrument of praise is also considered cursed.
Precisely.
Right, is also considered ugly, is also considered uncivilized. In fact, there are certain forms of praise, as we know, right? We're talking about dignified Baptists back in the day and Pentecostals, right? The difference was that, it doesn't take all that. We don't want to move our bodies in that way. And that is a huge consequence of oppression and how oppression has dispossessed Black people of their bodies. We'd rather die and see God in heaven without these bodies. We would rather die and let these bodies go than be tempted and haunted by the desires of these bodies, according to, Orthodox Christianity. And so what do we do with that?
Right.
How can we have an authentically human experience while at the same time loving God? And for me, the erotic accomplishes that. Because
the beloved dance, love yourself.
Like 100%. Right? Because the erotic is what enables us to love ourselves, because our body becomes something other than an albatross. Our body becomes the location where we experience these beautiful feelings that let us know that we are alive, that let us know that we are loved, that let us know that we have the capacity to love and that we can love other people.
Yes. I wish everybody that is listening tonight would take the moment to say to yourself that I am fearfully and wondrously made.
That's it.
And that everything I have that God has given me, God has given it to me for my good and for my ability to demonstrate that good.
That's it.
In the world. Self-love is the only launching pad that will help us to love others right.
Yes.
We have to from that. You're so right.
And so this brings us to the tenets of womanism as described by Stacey Floyd Thomas, right? Where we've got this redemptive self-love, right? And from said redemptive self-love, we can move on to radical subjectivity. Well, what do you mean by that? I mean that when I realize that I love myself or that I am worthy of love, then I can go and stand and exist authentically. Right. Well, authentic existence requires the erotic. It requires a kind of love that is bubbling on the inside that enables us to show up in the world when the world says, no, you're disgusting, or no, you're uncivilized, or no, you are not worthy or good enough. It speaks back. it speaks back so that what is being said does not resound in our ears as truth. And instead can stand on what we know. So that is wow, redemptive self-love and radical subjectivity, which then moves on to traditional communalism and the ways that we share those lessons with each other. And then finally critical engagement, which allows us to stand and say what we have been being taught. These messages that you've been given, they don't resound with my spirit, right? I'm sorry, the spirit does not resonate as you tell me these things. And that's also one of the beautiful things about it. One of the reasons that I wanted to write this book was I wanted us to learn a new language or a new practice of communing with the spirit. Because the spirit's going to tell you every time what's true and what's false.
That's right.
You know what I mean? You could be blind, you could be illiterate, you may never have read a thing in the Bible, but I truly believe that God has given us the ability to discern the truth.
Yes.
And that is the Spirit, right, within us. Right? But as Kelly Brown Douglas says, like the people of God act like God. The people of God get involved in the things that God gets involved in. The people of right? So that the erotic, this love that is bubbling up inside of us that causes us to go out and act in the world is the impetus for justice. It is the impetus for self-love. It is the impetus for community. It is the impetus for the removal of shame. And all of these things, as I've said in the book, are defiant acts.
Yes.
This is, I want to say to people, this is a powerful book. I want to encourage you to purchase the book.
Yes.
It's all of it. It's all in the chats, and you can just, you know where to go to get it. Erotic Defiance, Womanism, Freedom, and Resistance by Dr. Courtney Bryant.
Yes.
I want to make sure you get the book, but I also want to give you the opportunity to be a part of a free book giveaway. And if you type the hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers, you will win the opportunity to get this book. Hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. Now, I want to pause because if you have questions, I want you to write the word question and ask your question so that we can know that it is one about this subject. Amen. And then the other thing is, Dr. Bryant, this book is so neatly packed. Bodies as symbol, flesh as being, erotic resuscitation. I put a spell on you, conjuring phantasms for freedom. That's the dancing, that's the twerking, and I love it. It's good. And united in death, dying in as a posture of solidarity. Then you have a conclusion, theorization of the erotic. I want to talk about that united in death.
Yes.
Dying in as a posture of solidarity. Tell us more about that.
So the fourth chapter, let's see, how do I want to enter into this? The entire book, as I said, is a love letter to Black women about their bodies, right? And about the erotic capacities of those bodies. And so chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3 do all of that and do it really beautifully. But I also recognize that as a scholar, there are going to be people who are not Black who are going to read my book. And so I wanted to have something for them to say, okay, I see how Black women are engaging in erotic defiance. Can I do it too? Right? And my answer is a resounding yes. And so during the whole Michael Brown debacle, I was getting my PhD at Vanderbilt and was really, really blessed to be able to lead a couple of, I guess we could call them action items where, we explored what was going on and the travesty and how we were feeling, but also taking a moment to think through what it means for a community to have to be terrorized by the dead body of a 17-year-old lying uncovered in their community for hours. The kind of disrespect that demonstrates, and the way that white supremacy and the tyranny of white supremacy through these kinds of tactics affects us psychologically, right? And simply because there is a body left out and it's being disgraced in that way. But one of the most amazing things that happened during that time, and I don't know if you remember it, But on college campuses in Washington, D.C., there were a number of protests called die-ins. Now, die-ins were very comparable to sit-ins in that, during the civil rights movement, people would come and sit in. But in this situation, people came and they died in. In other words, they laid on the ground as though dead, right? And this disrupted commerce. This disrupted, like they would do it oftentimes in the street so that traffic couldn't move, right? And so it was supposed to be a way of disrupting the false peace in the world. Like, listen, these young Black men are dying. No one cares. So we will now lay down on the ground and we will be those bodies for these young men and for these young women and for the Black community when no one else is listening. And there was something so powerful about it for me because and I'm sure you remember, it was a very hopeless time. It was a very uncomfortable time. And it was also a time where as an African American, I felt very, very vulnerable, right? On the heels of that, then we had the Sandra Blands, and it just felt as though our bodies were vulnerable and that there was this terrorization happening because we had phones and cameras and we could actually see what was going on. So the symbolic nature of it really had an effect on me. But these die-ins also had this tremendous effect on me because they weren't just Black people dying, and it was people from all walks of life. And I began to wonder, first and foremost, wow, this is such a powerful symbol. It almost felt prophetic. It was like, listen, you can try to ignore this death, but we're going to be here and we are going to stand in the gap and serve as these bodies who are voiceless and these vulnerable people until someone listens. And so I wondered to myself, well, what exactly is going on here? And what, again, is the impetus? Like, what is the power? What is the energy that is enabling all of these people to come? And what I realized that we were all traumatized, whether we were Black, whether we were white, whether we were Latina. This was a traumatizing event. And in a way, these bodies called to us. They called to us and reminded us, listen, y'all are as vulnerable as well, and something needs to be done. And I almost felt like the Spirit of God was speaking through these people who were dying in. And I looked at what they were doing, right? Putting their bodies on the line, whether we're talking about the Heather Heyers of the world, who was the young lady who was killed at UVA when remember there was the protester and they just drove through, right? This was happening over and over again. So that if you were involved in these protests, you recognized that there was an element of danger. There was putting skin in the game. And so I considered this a form of communal eroticism, a way of putting our lives, our flesh on the line for one another to tell the world that these people, these Black people, that Black existence matters, that Black existence is worthy of defending. And again, I would call that a defiant act. Again, so that dying in became a form of erotic defiance. And this is my argument for how people who are not Black can participate in the defense of Black life with their own bodies. You got to put skin in the game. M. Sean Copeland mentions this over and over and over again in Flushing Freedom, that it doesn't matter that you want to profess solidarity, right? Mm-hmm. Solidarity is a loving act that requires the body. It is not just lip service. And so this is where the fourth chapter came from.
Thank you for that. That it's a very, very powerful chapter. People you can get the book on Amazon. That is a suggested place that you go to. But if there is some other place that you want to get the book, feel free to do that. I think this makes up for a wonderful conversation amongst any group to have. And so we have questions from our audience, Dr. Bryant. And so I want to lift up two of them that are here. One asks, how much are our biases a product of colonization in the idolatry of European sensibilities?
Child, I feel like the way that you pose that question, you already know the answer. Uh,
Yes.
I opened the first chapter with all of us are trapped. We're all trapped in a body of significations, like ideas about what people think. So when I showed up on this screen, you came up with all kinds of things that you imagined about me because of my hair, because of my glasses, because the way that I'm dressed, right? And so my authentic being now has to fight through all of those ideas that have been imposed upon my body, just in the same ways yours do as well. And that's work, right? That's work that we have to do every single day if we are going. I mean, some people go with the flow and say, well, you know, I'll be what you think that I am, right? And we see people performing the kinds of caricatures or the obedient Black person, the grateful Black person. But to be a Black person and to show up authentically and share what's really on your mind or how you feel in a given day, that's not normal, quite honestly. And I want to figure out a way for us to feel more comfortable in our skin. And I see that we're doing that more and more as the years go by. Um, I now want to figure out how to do it, but also maintain a sense of, I guess the word might be safety, and I'm not sure if the word is safety, um, as we deal with the consequences of what that means, because there will always be consequences. And I think that's an important thing to say, because one of the things about our conversations about freedom and liberty and even sexuality is that a lot of us think that we can run around town being free and that that'll just be that. There are always consequences, and we must weigh those consequences out, and we must operate or carry ourselves accordingly. And when I say that, I mean that this is death dealing. People will kill you for acting too free. People will fire you for acting too free. Um, and so the question becomes, what kind of a world do we need to create where those consequences are mitigated, if not nullified?
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to let Bishop Flunder chime in, but I want to make sure that I ask this last question. It says, but what if that world is among one another as Black folks? How do we love one another in the midst of internalized racism? How do we encounter the love among each other? I'm still reflecting on that scene with Celie and Sophia's relationship. You told Harpo to beat me.
Beat me. Yes. Oh, such a good question. You know, we must remember that colonization and anti-Blackness are woven into the fabric of our society, and even, sadly to say, into the fabric of our being, right? I mean, there has been many, many years and much effort put into making sure that Black people do not love themselves and do not love each other. That is not by happenstance. And so it's almost, if you will, it's almost like sin. Or if you were an alcoholic, it's like being an alcoholic. Like you got to die to yourself every day. I mean, to go back to a reference from The Color Purple, or I think it might even be Emily Towns, who says this: you have to beat the those things that are not true away with a stick. It's not something that'll just happen. It requires a posture of defiance. Now, when I say that, I am not talking about a posture of defiance against God, because God is the only thing that is going to get us through. But I am talking about a posture of defiance against the world and against those ideologies that say that who you are is not enough, or how you are is not okay, or that your flesh is somehow cursed, or that your sexuality or the fact that you have charisma and it draws people in, right? For a long time, I had to grapple with who I was, because I am a very charismatic person. I can go out and people will automatically feel a sense of connection and kinship with me, and gravitate towards me. And in various relationships, that's been perceived as flirting, you know? So you have to figure out for yourself, with the help of God, those things that make you you, and celebrate them even when the world tells you that it's a problem. And that requires a community of people who can allow you to hear it in your ears rather than just having to rely on, because the spiritual piece, it'll get old quick if you don't have somebody to remind you, no, this is what the Lord says, or this is who you are. But then we also have to remember that anti-Blackness is in. Like, it doesn't matter what year it is. It doesn't matter that we can wear our hair natural now, right? Anti-Blackness is always going to be in. It is part of how the way the world works. And so you have to catch it and name it every single time. You don't have to name it publicly, but you have to name it for yourself so that you don't fall into the trap. You also have to shun what I would call pornographic encounters. And I talk about this a little bit more in the book, but let me talk about it now. When I talk about pornographic encounters, I'm not just talking about sexual encounters. I'm talking about those kinds of relational encounters and relationships that are one-sided, that lack reciprocity. I'm talking about those kinds of things that, because in a capitalistic world, we are taught that you use people, right? What can I get out of you? Who can you introduce me to? But how many times do we do things simply for love? How many times do we do things simply for the sense of encounter and experience with one another and the ways that it allows us to commune with one another? I will definitely say we do need to shun the capitalistic ways of the world if we want to do this, because racial capitalism is a real thing. And so long as racial capitalism is a real thing and Black bodies are used for the profit and pleasure of white supremacy and white people, then we will always operate in that way as well, because that is how we understand success.
There's one thing that comes up for me in this conversation, it comes up for me often because I interact with all kinds of Black people. And we are not monolithic by any stretch of the imagination. We can look like we are. And we may have the same grade of hair, but we are not monolithic.
Absolutely
not. So
not.
when we talk about Black and what it means to be Black, I think we need to talk a little further about where is our sameness, where is our connection. And what do we do when we are in a situation or circumstance where we feel like we're in a safe place with Black people who are feeling the same way, only to find out that we are not even close to being on the same page.
Yeah.
And God knows that religion has this significant power and ability to make us in some ways devour our own people, and to at times do that in the name of God, because the name of God can justify just about anything. If you can convince people into saying this is what God wants.
Absolutely.
And I'm not talking about silk purse churches over against, if you understand what I'm saying, people who have more African experience-based churches. Let me put it that way. But I'm talking about now getting ready to vote. And it just blows my mind completely that we have a significant number of people who consider themselves other Black. There's us Black, and then there's other Black.
Ooh.
And that other Black is, in some ways, thinks of itself as a privileged Black, as a Black who has moved beyond being Black, and in the sense of community and connection. And I'm saying that while I know we're talking to people who are with us, that some of which have very little, if any, African blood in them. And they're Blacker than some of the Black people I know.
So they're performing proximity to whiteness?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's something very powerful when we are having these conversations. It's very powerful, I think, to clearly hope for, but understand that blackness is not blackness everywhere because of our skin.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not.
It is not. And
Mm-hmm.
politically, what I'm watching and listening to, even as we go into a new voting cycle before very long, there are a lot of people that are saying things that I think are problematic for our own community
Mm-hmm.
and diminishing conversations about eroticism, diminishing conversations about passion, conversations about Black church,
Mm-hmm.
conversations about Black educators.
You know, let me just say something, Bishop Flunder, when you talk about that, because that's just very true. And keep your mic on, because this is very short. When you took, you know, Tracy Blackman just wrote "Our Kind of People." There's a such thing, because our kind of people that's up in Martha's Vineyard are not the same our kind of people that's in Harlem.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you know, so there is what I understand what is being said, right? Around there are different types of Black people. We are all not the same.
No,
Mm-hmm.
we are not.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are going to do the work that we really need to do, because this is a great book, if we are going to do the work that we really need to do, I believe that the precursor to the work that we really need to do is to decide, are we really going to seek to do what needs to be done to help our communities have solidarity,
Mm-hmm.
regardless to whether we're Martha's Vineyard, you know what I mean, or down by the border by Mexico.
I'm not convinced. I'm
And
not
I'm
convinced.
not either.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. And it's a sad, it's interesting because the next book that I'm writing is about class. And
Yep.
I don't think that, I think that so long as there is an upper echelon to climb to, so long as there are, so long as there are privileges when performing proximity to whiteness, and we all know that there are, right? Like when I think about some of my well-to-do African American friends, they were very happy for Trump to be in office because
Absolutely.
tax shelter, right? And so this is what I was talking about earlier when I talked about a capitalistic system, and it's tough, right? Because we're all capitalists. America makes great capitalists. It's like, oh, oh, we want everybody to be great, but like, don't take our stuff.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, capitalism requires a perpetual underclass. And
Mhm.
as long as I can say, well, I'm not that underclass, well, first and foremost, that makes me better than you. But second,
Absolutely.
right? And like that is ultimately what folks want. Like folks, I'm not of the belief that everybody wants solidarity, quite honestly. And after writing the book, one of the things that I, began to think through, and that was another reason why chapter 4 became so important to me, is that a lot of the people that I saw out there putting their bodies on the line were not Black folk.
Come on, sister. Come on. Come on.
They were not.
It is what you are saying is absolute. And as we continue to meld into interracial relationships, interracial marriage, and I say all the time that in the next 2 generations, race is going to be a construct,
Yep.
very different.
Yep.
What do you mean? What are the things that you mean when you say you are check box, check box, check box? And I hear your heart. I hear it deeply. We need to find the jewels that are in this book, beloved, while we're talking tonight, and start talking about how we can make sure that these jewels that take into consideration what we have learned are not lost somehow on our need to identify with our own oppressors and absorb our own oppression. Something has to happen. This is a great book. This is like a testament.
It really is.
It really is.
Like when I'm thinking about the Third Testament, I'm like, she should definitely be one of the writers that come into it, because this book is going to help us. Now,
Yes,
Tracy
ma'am.
Blackman, I'm going to ask this second question that's here before we get out of here. But Tracy Blackman says, South Africans talk about the great accomplice to apartheid in as to get Africans to abandon their collective identity as Africans, to prioritize their tribal identities. If we are only tribes with tribal interests, we diminish our collective identity.
Yes, she's right.
Yes.
I hear you, sister. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think it becomes all the more important to then to identify ourselves through love.
Yep.
And that's uncomfortable because I want everybody Black to win. I'm gonna tell it. I'm gonna be very, very honest. I want everybody Black to win, but as Harriet Tubman taught us, everybody can't go. Everybody don't want to
not
go.
ready.
I almost agree with you. I want everybody Black to win. That's Black, but not. And I'm not talking about Black
I heard
faith.
that.
I know, I hear you. And so that's interesting because it immediately had me thinking about what James Cone says about being ontologically Black, and to be about the business of the liberation of Black people, right? And to move in that direction. And I mean, there is a good number of folk who are happy eating Pharaoh's raisin cakes.
Clarence Thomas.
And I mean, and it ultimately, do you want to suffer and identify with Blackness, or do you want to have the privileges of performing proximity to whiteness?
Clarence Thomas.
And so when we answer that question, right? Yeah. When we answer the question of how can we get to a place where more people, right? Because it's always going to be a slow drip, where more people feel a sense of power and strength and pride in being who they are. Well, that requires teaching us the true history of our people, and that it didn't begin when we set foot on American soil, right? Charles Marsh talks about the second creation, but one of the things that I was really interested, what was Black life like before it was corrupted by enslavement? What did that look like? And I mean, a lot of us want to imagine that it was moonbeams and rainbows, and I'm sure we had our own issues, but I'm also sure that we had our own strengths, we had our own cultures, we had our own aesthetics, right? Everything now is simply what has been shoved down our throats.
Right.
We have never had the opportunity to truly look at and celebrate our culture for what it is. And so how do we now piece together a sense of identity of a culture that we, in all honesty, never knew?
That's really good. Now, this is the last question. There are, particularly around chapter 3. So this person is saying,
I know somebody's ready to eat me up over chapter 3.
It's that twerking, girl.
I know. Like they're gonna be mad I came for the twerking. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, listen, it's either gonna be twerking or swag surfing, with that one or the other. So anyway, what is the message to our young sisters, especially as to the importance of appreciating their erotica, yet still being respectful and earning respect from those who partake of the above?
I want to change the language of that. I love that question, but I want to change the language of it. So I need to begin here. I love a good twerk in my bedroom on a Saturday evening, right? I love it. But as the Reverend Dr. Courtney, you are not going to catch me twerking at the Houstons, right? During like a day party. That's not going to happen. And I think part of the reason for that, is that I consider my body sacred, and it's taken a very long, it actually hasn't taken a very long time to feel that way. My mom did an excellent job with me in making sure that I always knew that my body was sacred. Now, that didn't mean that it wasn't always about what you can't do. It was about the power of my body. It was about the fact that anyone who was in my presence was getting a gift. The gift of my presence, the gift of my personality. And then if we want to talk about sexuality, the gift of sharing in my body, inhabiting the space that is me. I feel like we are far, far, far too cavalier with our bodies and the ways that we use our bodies in public spaces. And I'm concerned about it simply because of that gaze. Now, I want to name that I recognize that Toni Morrison would say, get whiteness off your eyeballs. And I get that and I understand that. But I know the ways that the gaze of white supremacy perverts and distorts our practices. So for me, this is just me personally, there will be safe spaces in which I twerk, and there will be spaces that do not deserve my twerk, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
So in chapter 3, when I'm talking about twerking, I use the example of Vashti, right? Who, right? The king demands that she come and dance before
That she come and twerk.
And his friends naked. And she says, no.
No.
No. And so it's interesting to me that so many young people and adults, for that matter, believe that freedom is shaking your behind so that you can feel like you are desired or that you can garner desire. That's what it feels like. And that's fine. And that's a beautiful thing as well. But it's not the only thing. It's not the only powerful move. And Vashti teaches us what the power of refusal is. No, you don't deserve my body in this space.
Yeah, I hear that.
Space is not sacred enough for the performance of my body. And I think that matters. And I think offering that as an option, not the only option, but one where women and men can determine for themselves, does this space deserve my twerk? Does it deserve my performance? Will that performance or will that freedom be misconstrued here and corrupted by a particular gaze? And does it matter? Right? Again, because at the end of the day, you can be as free as you want, but you got to remember there's always going to be consequences. And it's up to you to decide if those consequences are worthy of the performance of liberty that you want to engage in.
And so I got to attach this before Bishop Flunder goes. Let me attach this, and then Bishop Flunder, you go. Okay. How does this intersect with sex positive identities?
Yes.
Is that a question for me? Yes. I mean, it depends on the way that you look at it. If I'm talking about a space that doesn't deserve my sexual positivity, then I think it's still sex positive. I think it's just about discerning the kinds of spaces that you want to be sexual in. And also, what kind of fruit does it bear? Joyful fruit is worthy, right? Liberating fruit is also worthy. The expression of love and gratitude or celebration of the body, it's worthy. But here's the thing, there are no hard and fast rules. And I think this is where we mess up. We want to be all free or all repressed. And what I'm saying is that we're mature. It's time for us to eat real food. And when we're eating real food, that means in our spiritual maturity, we get to discern whether a space is for our performance of sexuality or not. That's not for me to decide. I can only decide that for myself. But I do want to put on the table the right to refusal. Because for me, when Black women or Black people in general engage in an ethic of refusal, that's about as defiant as it gets. And I'm not saying that that's the only option, but it is one that I think is often dismissed as not a possibility.
Bishop Flunder.
Oh, I'm a woman who's been to Nigeria, an African American who has been to Nigeria, and just about every major event, but especially a wedding. Nigerian women, when they get through putting on their headdress, having their faces done, and the way in which their dresses are made accentuates the positive. There's no question about that, especially the blessing, as we say, of goodness and mercy that follows all the days of our life. Okay? And the whole idea of the night is for those women, both the bride and all of the bride's attendants are going to bring that into the wedding party.
That's right.
With great joy and incredible pride. Now we'll call it twerking because there's a lot of twerkness in it. But the men in the room and other family members throw money on them in large quantities for bringing that into. And here is an example in some ways of the same dance, in many ways, but it's being thought of very differently.
The gays, yep.
Am I right? It's thought of very differently. And if they come in and they don't bring that, the family's trying to figure out what's wrong with you. The whole idea is that, we dressed you up, spent all this money and got you all organized so that you could bring goodness and mercy into this room and do the best you can to demonstrate that you love everything that's following you. If you understand what I'm saying. I find it very interesting when I experience this there. And then we come here and I see in many ways the same reality that happens among some of our people and our young people in particular, but there's a very different, I think you may understand what I'm saying. You understand me, Bishop?
It's the gays. Like, so they're contextually, like what you've described is a community experience that is known and understood. And actually, it's actually a kind of mating ritual as well. Like, so the women who dance are the women who are preparing to get married in the future, right? So we must, name that those things are at play and that there's a kind of context that surrounds that kind of ceremony. And we also know, because of the ways that Black people have been dispossessed of our bodies in America, our understanding, the way that we see, the way that people look at us and interpret what we're doing also matters and imbues the experience with other kinds of meanings.
I think we say we need to admit that closets kill.
They do. Closets do kill.
Closets kill.
And I actually, so this goes back to the third chapter, when I say
that third chapter could be something else by itself.
Surely is.
That third chapter.
Surely is.
I'm loving. I'm about to put you in my pocket, and we're gonna go on the road.
All right.
But one of the things that I say is, I am not trying to stuff anybody back in the closet. That is not what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I do. I then likened it to the communion table. Right. And I'm not sure how communion used to happen when you were a little girl, but, in the Baptist tradition, that white sheet was up and that white sheet was up. Right. And like context, the way that we look at it, that, that white sheet wasn't there to stuff anything back in, but to declare the sacrality of what was going on behind the sheet. So I don't want to consider it a closet, but more maybe of a hush harbor, if we were to use Karen Baker Fletcher, where she talks about, I don't want to stuff anybody into the closet, but I do want to make sure that we are creating spaces that allow for people to understand the sacrality, the specialness, the beauty of what is being offered, right? Because that gaze means everything. And when we look upon things with the gaze of our oppressors, which unfortunately that's what double consciousness is, it compromises how we understand these sacred practices, these liberating practices. So I don't want to do away with them. I just want to make sure that the environments that we're doing them in are such that we are giving life as we engage in them.
And we should determine that
100% all day. We should. Now, I would say we should determine that in conjunction with the Spirit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Lord knows, Courtney will go off and be like, "Yes, and this is great," and then the Spirit will be like, "Hold up, sis, that ain't it."
Oh yeah, thank God for the Spirit that says, "Hold up."
Amen.
I hear that.
Amen.
I want you both to give me final statements. Dr. Courtney, you can go first about the book, something that we didn't touch on. Bishop Flunder, you can go after. And for those of you that want to buy the book, I'll say it for the last time, please make sure that you purchase the book on Amazon. It's a great gift as well. Also, you can win the book tonight, win a copy of the book by putting hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers.
Very excited for that.
Dr. Courtney.
So I guess in closing, I just want to appeal to those who are listening. If you have been wondering about where your body fits into your faith, if you've been trying to figure out what exactly is going on with your sexuality or your erotic capacities and the ways that people have been understanding them, if you want to begin to think through your relationship with God from a pneumatological perspective, that means the Holy Spirit, right? This is a pneumatology of the erotic and the ways that the Spirit participates in our erotic capacities and the ways that we participate in God as we demonstrate love in and through our flesh. It has been a labor of love. I love every single chapter of this book. I can say you can read it, one chapter at a time. You could go straight to chapter 4 and still be okay. And I would love for people to read it and catch me on Instagram at Erotic Defiance and let me know what you thought about the book, because I love being in conversation about this book and would love to go even deeper.
Thank you for that. Bishop Flunder?
I'm thrilled. This has been a wonderful conversation. And I think it is for freedom that Christ has made us free.
Amen.
And it's so important that we not be entangled again with the yokes of bondage.
Come on. Yes.
Just so happy to hear freedom talk. Freedom talk. Freedom talk. And I'm encouraging all of us, we are not incapable of making the correct decisions that we need to make for ourselves, for our family, for our community, in a tent of freedom. We don't have to be in bondage. We can be in freedom and make the decisions that we need to make to be a blessing to our families, to our loved ones, to our communities, and to our future. I am praying that we will get this book and start to read it and get the chains and shackles off of our minds. And then our bodies can come along and also be free. God bless you. Thank you so much, Dr. Courtney Bryant, for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. And just one last thing. Somebody is asking, is this book helpful in helping young becoming women understand the awakening of their bodies?
So I will say that, because I am a scholar, the book is, at least the very first chapter, is a little heady. Actually, Bishop Vanessa, you tell me. It's clear that you read the book. What do you think? Like, how old does a person need to be and how learned?
I think that, obviously I don't think a teenager, I don't think this is for a teenager, but I think this is somebody that's in their mid-20s on up. They can read this book, and it can do something for them. It could really help them, especially those who are in religious environments who are suffocating. Right now, somebody from their church might say not read it, but those that are suffocating, those in some kind of religious environment. I won't name denominations, but the ones, and they need a breath of fresh air. This is what this book will do for them.
Thank you so
Amen.
much.
Thank you all. I want to encourage you all to get the book. I want to encourage you all to put hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. And now we're going to go to our advertisement.
From the blues to hip-hop, African Americans have driven sonic innovation for more than a century. While styles have changed, there's one sound that's remained constant, a source of strength and courage, comfort and wisdom. Gospel.
That's a little bit of gospel. Gospel music is soul. Gospel music is R&B. Gospel music is funk. It's hip hop. Gospel music is the full spectrum in terms of its sound of black music and beyond.
Mahalia Jackson, what was special about her voice?
She believed every word she was singing, and she wanted you to believe it.
Preachers have style, right? Gospel singers have style, right? Black style in music and preaching is similar because it allows black people to believe that they can survive a bit longer. My mother had gone to New Bethel Baptist Church.
Is God still stirring your nest?
Theo Franklin would preach and then Aretha would sing. Oh my God, if you ain't got the spirit then, you dead.
The sermon becomes the song. The song becomes the sermon.
God, we ask that you would reinvigorate somebody.
It's almost as if there's a soundtrack in a church setting.
Amen, brother.
That was beautiful. For generations, gospel music and preaching have formed the bedrock of the black religious experience.
The sound still connects people. The sound still gathers people.
These astonishing art forms, carrying an enduring tradition, continue to evolve. Do you think there will always be gospel music 100 years from now?
I don't see how we can thrive without gospel music.
That's right.
I say it's going to always be there forever.
Listen, as we tell the story of how a people learned to sing the Lord's song in a strange land. This is the powerful story of gospel.
God bless each of you. What a joy and a blessing to be in conversation with you tonight. And I am praying that you will take this opportunity to be a blessing to the gatekeepers. Cash App, $TFAM Annual, or PayPal, www.paypal.me/TFAM Justice. Help us.
Thank you so much. And so now we are going to give away the book tonight. Please, I hope you have put in hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. Make sure you put it the way you see it on the screen. If you have any spaces, it will not pick up what you have written. So it's hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers, all one word. Hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers, all one word. Okay, Pastor Sue, let's go. And our winner tonight is Marlene C. McLaurin. Congratulations to you. Congratulations. Please make sure that you put in your full name and your address. We would appreciate it. And congratulations to you once again. We say Happy New Year to everyone. I want to remind you to please follow this great doctor at Erotic Defiance. Follow her. She may have some kind of chats or doing something on the road, whatever it is, you want to be in the know, and particularly around this book, and then seeing what's happening next, her next offerings that she will bring to us. So grateful for your presence, Dr. Bryant. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bishop.
We love you, sister. You know we do. Yep. we're going to do some things together. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah. Everybody have a great evening. God bless you. Thank you so much.